Assalamu alaikum. So I just finished the story of Prophet Shuayb, which is my name. That's the first time I've ever listened to his story. I actually had no idea. And Prophet Shuayb is an interesting story because a lot of things that we could take from and learn from it. You don't really hear too much about that story or about that prophet, but there's still a lot of benefit that you can get from the lessons that come from it. And if you aren't aware, Prophet Shuayb is one of the 4 Arab prophets, at least the ones that are mentioned in the Quran. And those include Prophet Hud alayhi salam, Saleh alayhi salam, Shuayb alayhi salam, and obviously Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And Prophet Shuayb was said to be Khatibul Anbiya, which means very well spoken and reasonable person. So to outline the story, Prophet Shuayb was sent to Madian, or he was a brother amongst the Madianites. And that doesn't necessarily mean that he was taking part in the wrong things that they were doing. It's just that he was a brother in the sense of the tribe or the nation of Madian. So he was part of the people living there. And Madian was also known as Ashabul Aika, which means the people of the woods or the people of the tree. And this was a interesting thing because the people of the tree or woods, which comes from trees, is that this is referring to the trees that the Madianites would be going to as a form of faith, as they believe the souls of their ancestors were residing in these trees, and they believed that they could get their blessings, which is why they started to hang their utensils and weapons and clothings and things like that. And this was to seek blessings from the spirits in these trees. Now, it wasn't necessarily that they believed the trees to be God, or they didn't believe in one God, but the fact that they went to trees for spiritual rituals, or they had acts of worship related to these trees, that also counts as associating partners with Allah. So they essentially associated partners with Allah. And this also happens if you were to take just a mere creation or an object and assign a divine attribute of God to said object, or creation, which obviously is not right, as all the attributes belong to God alone. Anything that you're seeking from any of these objects or whatever, you should have faith and you should believe these attributes to be from God. And nothing happens without the will of Allah, obviously. So that's basically what they were doing wrong. First of all, what happens if you do this is you indirectly not follow the prophets, as all the prophets came with the same message, which was worship one God and go to only one God for anything that you need and all that, So if you were to do anything like this, if you were to associate any partners with God, you are essentially not following the message of all the prophets, and you have not believed in all of their messages, and that's how you are a non-believer. And the main part of the story is how the people of Madian were engaging in business and economic and financial corruption. So the people of Madian were apparently extortionists. They were robbers, scammers. They were highway robbers, meaning people would be traveling and they would rob them, or people would be traveling and in a land that they didn't even own, they would charge taxes for passing through. They took money by force, and they would also deal unfairly. And some of the examples that I heard when dealing unfairly was they would overcharge you for something, so they would increase the price, and when giving you the item, they would give you a lower quantity than they promised. And another thing is, for example, when they're selling milk, they would mix some water with the milk, things like that. So they were scammers. And another big thing is they would also engage in Riba, in usury. Usury is the correct word rather than interest in English, apparently. So I guess I'm going to be using that from now on. But so there's a good amount of things that you could say about usury from Islam, but we'll get into that inshallah. So when Prophet Shuayb went to the people of Madian to preach the messages that he came forth with, he first started off with worshipping Allah alone, as he wanted to get rid of the rituals and the worships related to the trees that they were always engaged in. And this is obviously a very important message, as this is also the first message that all the messengers came with when they went to the people. All the messengers told the people to worship in one God alone, and not associate any partners with God. And so, Prophet Shuayb wanted to make sure that they stopped seeking blessings from the trees, or the tree, the acre. And he also called out their ways when it came to economic corruption. The Quran talks about this in many places, as they had a lot of debates and a lot of arguments. And these are mostly in chapter 7 in Surah Al-A'raf, and also chapter 11, which was Surah Hud. And in the Quran, in chapter 7 verse 85, he said, "So give just measure and weight. Do not defraud people of their property, nor spread corruption in the land after it has been set in order. This is for your own good, if you are truly believers." And so he told them to fulfill the measure and the weight when dealing. So essentially to not scam people when it came to marketing a certain product based on the volume or based on the weight, and don't deceive the people by putting false measurements and false weights in there. And this is also a good and interesting point, because it can apply to us as well. And in the tafsir, Ibn Kathir mentions what Allah leaves for you of lawful earnings after you have given people their rights is better than wealth acquired through cheating. And in Sahih Bukhari, it's narrated by Hakim bin Hizam, and he says that the Rasul ﷺ said, if both parties spoke the truth and described the defects and qualities, then they would be blessed in their transaction. And if they told lies or hid something, then the blessings of their transaction would be lost. When dealing, you have to make sure you don't deceive people, you don't scam people, and you are honest when it comes to the descriptions, and when it comes to telling people about the item. And this will also ensure that Allah puts barakah in your transaction, And I was also watching a video from Osama Iyad al-Shura, and he mentioned how a successful transaction isn't based on results. So if you want to sell your car and it has defects, lying about it or deceiving the buyer to hide the defects and selling the car that way, and you would get the buyer to buy the car off of you, will not be a successful transaction. Because telling the truth about the defects, and even if the buyer changes his mind based on the defects or based on you being honest, and he backs out of the transaction, it's still successful, because the success of the transaction is based on if you fulfilled the commands of Allah when pertaining to business. So if you have defects when selling something, you should start with the defects. And whether the person will buy the item or buy the car or not, you just leave that to Allah, as you've done your job by being honest and by not deceiving and being authentic, and leave that part of the transaction to Allah. Have tawakkul on Allah. So that's a very interesting point, and that can apply to everyone, not only the people that wants to resell something that they own, but also when someone wants to start a business. As an important thing about business is you should not deceive your customers, and you should not lie about your products. You should be completely honest. Obviously, also you should make sure that the item you're selling is halal as well. And in the Quran, in chapter 7 verse 85, Prophet Shuayb says to the people of Madian, "This is for your own good if you are truly believers." And so that tells you how, when it comes to dealing with business and deceiving the buyers and everything, that applies to everyone, and that's how we should live life. So this is how we should implement the rules in the transactions we make, and this applies to every Muslim. It applies to all the believers of the Quran and Sunnah, And Al-Tabari mentions that giving full measure is better than taking from others unjustly. And regarding that, Mufti Mek also said that which remains after you have given people their due is far better for you than to eat that which belongs to others. And also in the tafsir, Al-Tabari explains that giving full measure is better than taking from others unjustly. And Mufti Menk also said, that which remains after you have given people their due is far better for you than to eat that which belongs to others. And so he explains about borrowing unjustly and taking credit. So he mentions how the people of Madian were rich and they still like to take things on credit, and also they would be borrowing money for no reason. And he also mentioned how borrowing money is a big burden and should only be done as a last resort. And this also applies to us when it comes to borrowing money from the bank, taking loans, things like that. That's obviously very complex, as that involves riba as well. But borrowing money even from people as you're not sure when you will pay them or whatever. But obviously borrowing money from people is better than taking a loan from the bank. But this all is to say that you have to make sure you're able to be put in a position where you can pay this person back if you were going to be borrowing money from them, and understand that borrowing money is a big thing and you should not be undermining the issue. And this is also a very dangerous thing, as people would have a job and they'd be taking a loan or they'd be borrowing money, and they'd have to be paying credit every month, or they'd be having a mortgage, or they'd just be having to pay loans with interest every month. And they didn't take into account the power of Allah when He told us to adjust our lives according to how much money we have in our pockets. So when these people take the loans and they pay every month and they pay interest, and they're sure that they can pay this money back, when they're doing it while undermining these issues, and they fail to foresee the ramifications or the sins or whatever when it pertains to this issue, they didn't foresee the power and the will of Allah, that He then puts them in a situation where they maybe lose the job and they're not even able to pay these things back, and now they're forced to give all their assets back to the people that claim it, because they're not able to pay these loans or whatever back, and now they're homeless on the street, and they have nothing to their name, and now they owe a lot of people money, and they're going through court cases, and and now their whole lives are ruined. So subhanallah, I hope that this never happens to me, it never happens to all of us, inshallah. But you guys should be careful, and that goes for me as well. And Mufti Menk also talks about this, and it's also very interesting because I know people as well who do this. They think that having a house is something that you have to do nowadays, and they also think that taking a loan is as well is fine. These are all things done by the kuffar, and they think that following the trends of the kuffar is fine, or it's better than following the deen. And so they fail to see that you could live your life living in a rented accommodation for the rest of your life, as in the end, when you pass away, you're not going to be taking that house with you. As when you die, the house that you bought or the house that you rented in, regardless, you're going to leave them both behind. And even when you want to think about your kids, you could put them in a good situation with guidance and everything, and tell them how to make money in a situation where they could buy the house justly, or they could continue renting it. You don't necessarily have to be buying houses. And this whole thing that people say about houses is a part of your life, or you want to feel like it's home or whatever, that's just something that they're coping with to justify something that's haram. That's if you're going to be buying these houses unjustly and unlawfully when it comes to Islamic paradigms. And the main lesson here is you should be tailoring and making your life in accordance to your pocket and accordance to the religion. And you should be living a halal life and not be slaves of credit. And so in the Quran, in chapter 11 verse 86, Prophet Shuayb says, "What is left as a lawful gain by Allah is far better for you if you are truly believers, and I am not a keeper over you." And Mufti Menk says this as, the little remnants that you have that is pure is better for you than that which does not belong to you. And this is about lawful income, as you should not be sacrificing your deen to be making more money, and you should be content and be appreciating the smaller subjective amount of money that you have in your pockets, as long as you're able to live a good enough life. And that way your lawful income and your life will have a lot more barakah. And this is also to do with materialism, as people think that living a materialistic life, even if that means going on credit and being in debt as long as they can keep funding this materialistic life. They think that living that life is better than living a halal, content, non-materialistic life, which involves just being happy with what you have, with stuff that is all that you need and necessary, and you have full faith in God, and you just continue worshiping Him, and you don't have to depend on all these things that make you look cool or make you look flashy and all those things. So that's also something that we have to keep in mind. And Prophet Shuayb in the Quran, in chapter 7 verse 86, he says, "Remember when you were very few, then He increased you in number." And this is also telling us to remember our humble beginnings, as we should be grateful and thankful and not always be chasing riches, and especially if it's against our deen. And we should not be obsessed with all these things and not be going against the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the people of Madian, they called him foolish, and they mocked him. They called him forward to do deals with them that were not allowed, and he refused, obviously. And they also doubted him, and they falsely accused him, as they kept arguing, and they called him a liar, and they accused him of having an ulterior motive to preach and guide people away from chasing the riches. But at the same time, they said that he wanted to push them away, but he wanted to use that opportunity to earn and make a lot of money from the available free opportunities that he caused, because he pushed these people away from these income sources. And then Prophet Shuayb in verse 1188 told them, "I do not want to do what I am forbidding you from. I only intend reform to the best of my ability. My success comes only through Allah." And so that's to say, he didn't want to be hypocritical. And also, every day is a preparation for the akhirah, as you should do much good as you can every day. And Mufti Menk mentions and explains about the word tawfiq, as tawfiq is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts something, and when He grants something through His mercy. And also, it's when He chooses someone for something. Like the two examples that he gave was, if two people were to open up their own shops, and they were to be exactly next to each other and selling the exact same thing, but one becomes successful and another one doesn't. This is to say that the successful one, Allah has accepted and granted him wealth and business, but the other one, Allah decided not to give him. And the reason behind that was maybe it wasn't best for him. This is to say how tawfiq is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the decider of how much wealth you are going to have and how much success you will have. And so if you don't have these things, it's maybe because of the will of Him that it's best for you, because maybe you could become arrogant, maybe this is not going to be right for you, because this could lead down a wrong path and things like that. And also, it's worth mentioning the story of Qarun, who was amongst Bani Israel with Prophet Musa, because Qarun was just a normal man who was a believer amongst Bani Israel with Prophet Musa, and then he asked Prophet Musa and Allah for riches. He really wanted it, and so Allah granted it, and Allah gave him all the wealth he could imagine. And with all that wealth, he became very arrogant, and when he became very arrogant, he slowly started to become a disbeliever. I don't know if he no longer believed there was one God, but he just decided not to supplicate and no longer take part in worships. And he was part of the opposition to Prophet Musa, so he would be challenging him, he would be slandering him, he'd be trying to build up wrong reputations and false reputations against Prophet Musa. So yeah, he was a big enemy of Islam. And what essentially happened is, Prophet Musa, with the permission of Allah, asked the earth to swallow him. So Qarun, along with all of his treasures and all of his wealth and everything, got swallowed. And at the end of the day, this is to say that he died, he left this world, and he left his wealth. None of that followed him, and all of his wealth also disappeared. And that's to say that without the will of Allah, none of this matters, and Allah can take it away from you whenever He wants. And you should always be thankful. You should never be arrogant. You should always remember your humble beginnings. You should always be humble, and you should never lose your faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so back to the story. So the people of Madian told Prophet Shuayb in the Quran in chapter 11 verse 87, they asked sarcastically, "O Shuayb, does your prayer command you that we should abandon what our forefathers worshipped, or give up managing our wealth as we please? Indeed, you are such a tolerant, sensible man. So they started to mock him, and they wanted to separate the deen from the dunya. And so they wanted to separate religion from business. And when it comes to this, some people think that business is one thing and religion is another. And if you want to continue with religion, you can keep that to the side, and you don't want to interfere it when it comes to business. And this is a very problematic thing, as there are people that exist who worship and look like they're religious and go to the masjid and everything, and when it comes to business and those things, they were to do it unlawfully, and they would be engaging in haram or transactions. And this is not to say that if you were to engage in sin, it's you can't repent or whatever. This is to say the people who live double lives and they see business as one thing and religion as another. This is to say that if you want to act like and look like you're practicing the religion, you should be doing it in all aspects of your life. As Islam came with commands and came with instructions and a guide on how to live life when it comes to all aspects, And this is also to do with people who feel like they want to live life the way they want to, and feel like religion is just too strict. And they think that, Islam is all about just praying 5 times a day and that's it. But it's more than that, as Islam came to show you how you should live your life. And then Prophet Shuayb in the Quran, in chapter 11 verse 89, he says, "O my people, do not let your opposition to me lead you to a fate similar to that of the people of Nuh, Hud or Saleh, and the people of Lut are not far from you." And he's talking about them not listening to him because they don't like him. This is also a small lesson for us, as sometimes when we dislike someone, be it a normal person, a layman, or even a scholar or a sheikh, some people, when it comes to those people, they let their hatred and disliking of them take over, and they don't listen to the wisdom and the lessons that are being said by those people, even though the things may be right. And this also even applies to normal people, as if you don't like someone, and if you were to say something truthful, you may just think that this guy he's I don't like this guy, don't listen to him or whatever, But yeah, that's just a small lesson there. But then the people of Madian challenged Prophet Shuayb. They challenged him to drop a piece of the sky down, and the punishment that they faced eventually involved many things, apparently. As was said, that Allah stopped wind, and He made the sky dark, and He caused a lot of heat and humidity as people started to sweat, and there was obviously no way for all of the humid air to go, as there was no wind as well. And also other punishments like earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and fire from the volcanoes, and also dust. And they couldn't get out of their homes, and they were eventually buried, and they burned, and they were also swallowed by the earth. And in the end, they all died, and they left their wealth, and they left no trace. And this is to show how, all your material and worldly possessions that you have and that you're obsessed with, eventually you're going to die and you're going to leave it all behind. But this was them leaving no trace was also a lesson, as Allah wanted to make an example out of them, and they were not even worth putting them here, keeping them here. There is no evidence of them, And also this is another lesson of life and your material possessions and everything being temporary again. And that's just a very big lesson. So what are the things that we could learn from this story about Prophet Shuayb and the people of Madian? Well, first and foremost, obviously the main story is you have to worship in one God alone. Do not seek any attribute or any type of blessing or anything from any of His creations, as all the attributes and characteristics that are divine and everything is only from God alone. Walking to the masjid right now, one thing I forgot to say was from the learnings of the story of Prophet Shuayb was we should remember to not separate the way we live our life as Muslims and the religion when it comes to praying, because the religion is not only limited to praying, it's also how you conduct your life in all aspects, not only business, everything. And apart from that, the other lessons is how to deal with business. So if you were to sell anything, whether you have a business or whether you are reselling your own things, you don't scam, you're fully honest, you're fully authentic, you're able to give proper descriptions, and you don't try to deceive your customer, and you also don't try to take advantage of the naivety or the genuinity or genuineness of the buyer, things like that. And also when it comes to credits, seeking credit, or if you want to get a loan, and especially riba. Now, I'll be mentioning a list of hadith regarding riba. As to my knowledge or from my research, I understand that these are sahih, but if I'm wrong, I hope Allah doesn't hold me accountable. And if you guys want to correct me, do let me know. I don't know if anyone's watching. And if not, then may Allah guide me to the correct information, inshallah. So, one, we have the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, "No one increases his wealth by usury except that his result will be little." And in another one, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, "Stay away from 7 mortal sins." And when asked what they are, he said, "Idolatry with Allah, occult magic, killing a soul that Allah has sanctioned except for a just cause, consuming usury, usurping the property of an orphan, fleeing the battlefield, and accusing chaste but unwary believing women." And another one, "Adultery and usury do not become prevalent among people, but that punishment of Allah Almighty is justified against them." And then, "Allah has cursed the one who consumes usury, its client, its witness, and its recorder. Usury and adultery do not become widespread among people, but that they will become vulnerable to the punishment of Allah Almighty." And this also is related to if people were to be working in banks, because they're not necessarily engaging in riba, but they are taking part in the transactions because they're helping the organization who are doing it, So subhanallah, we should all be careful when dealing with this situation. May Allah protect us. And another one, "Usury has 72 doors, the least of which is like a man who goes into his mother." Another translation says this as, "The least of which is equivalent to a man having intercourse with his mother." Subhanallah, this is very surprising or shocking language, and it's very crazy to hear. But despite how it sounds, the way that this message is said is to illustrate the moral and spiritual seriousness of engaging in usury. So we should all be careful with this. And then, "A time will surely come upon people in which none will remain but that he consumes usury. If he does not consume it, he will be affected by its dust. And an era will surely come to people in which a man will not care from where he acquires his wealth, either lawfully or unlawfully." And this is to show the modern state in which people are getting their money, whether it's by riba or whether it's by getting it unlawfully, by going into haram, or by staying away from getting justly by the religion as a true Muslim. So we should all be aware of these situations, these hadiths, these stories, and take inspiration and knowledge from these stories to make sure we conduct ourselves properly and live our lives as true Muslims and be making our income properly. May Allah protect us all, and may He prevent us from getting into such situations where we are forced to, and even if we are forced to, may He keep our hearts steadfast so that we don't get into this haram. May He make it easy for us. So yeah, that's all I want to say. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.